It's time for another episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, dig into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and pretty much any other shiny object that happens to catch my attention. Today, my special guest is Bryan Melvin, and we are going to be talking about his near-death experience. Bryan, it's great to see you again, my friend. I was going to say, welcome back to the show. You've never been on my show, so welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Shaun. How are you doing today?
You know, it's been a long week. I'm a little tired, but I always get energized when I do an interview. So excited just to have a conversation and make some great content to share your story with my viewers and my listeners. Bryan and I have a bunch of mutual friends. We were just part of a big Afterlife virtual conference a number of weeks back. And so just in hearing bits and pieces of Bryan's story along the way, I wanted to make sure we captured some content for this show so everybody can meet him and get to know about what he experienced on the other side of the veil. Bryan, I typically like to start conversations just kind of setting the stage, getting a person's kind of backstory. So kind of if we take life before your near-death experience, just give us context, upbringing, faith exposure, like a little context for who you are or who you were before your near-death experience.
Okay, before I grew up in a Christian home. It was a Southern Baptist home, but we always were made to go to church when I was little. But as soon as I got old enough and I just, start thinking for myself and the way life goes, I always say that the cartoon Bullwinkle corrupted me because they had Sherman and the time machine and they go back in time and talk about all these Greek philosophers. And so I would go to the library and find books on philosophy, start reading those. And then I just didn't believe in God so much and kind of fell away, became an agnostic, bounced between atheism and agnosticism, and finally into a full-blown militant atheist. That's basically my background. And next thing I knew, I had an after-death experience, which I never intended or expected to ever happen.
Well, and people are always curious to hear how was it that you died? So, what were the circumstances that led you into having this encounter?
The circumstances that led me into this is I was an electrician working at a construction site in Tucson, Arizona. It was pretty hot, and that day the marquee on the bank across the street was 121 degrees. We go into real super early in the morning, and we try to get off before noon or right after about maybe 1 o'clock and call it a day. So we work about 8 hours, maybe 9 hours. And so I was working at a construction site, and my supervisor, who was a Christian at the time, we kind of made fun of him. Why he didn't fire us, I don't know, but we did. But he came back from Nogales, Mexico, Nogales, down there on the border. He took his family there, and he came back, and his car overheated in Mexico, so we filled up the company thermos with creek water or pond water from Mexico, brought it back over, and it was sitting in the back of the cooler, way in the back, and in those days in construction etiquette, if you were by a truck and you see a cooler, you can drink out because it's so hot. And since that was our company truck, I went there. One thermos was empty. So I went to the other one in the back, picked it up, and it was full, and I handed, just big 5-gallon thing or 4-gallon thing, lifted it over my head and started drinking it and drinking it and drinking it. And then I handed it to a coworker, and I said, "Boy, this is warm." And he took a little bit of it and he spat it out. When he opened up the top, and I call it Darwin soup. Have you ever seen algae infested water? That's kind of what I drank, and little wormy things were swimming around in it like flat spaghetti. and so what happened is I drank contaminated water, contracted cholera, and who knows what else. I contracted from that mess. Yeah, so I was diagnosed with cholera afterwards, but it was, who knows.
So, in terms of your body reacting to taking in that contaminated water, do you end up in the hospital? Like, what are your surroundings as your body is declining?
Well, my surroundings were, simply put, was that I was sort of a, strong-headed guy, and I going to do things my way. So I took the Jack Daniels, the medication Jack Daniels, Wild Turkey, and all that. Thought that would kill whatever I drank. I was joking about it that night, and so I didn't go to the hospital right away, and I thought I could take care of it myself. And so I went. I had to rent had a duplex apartment. Had a couple of roommates there that rented rooms there, and so we. So they were there and they witnessed everything, and they were making plans to go up on a holiday weekend in the summer to go up and fly over to Grand Canyon. They had a friend up there in Phoenix who had a private plane. We were planning for that, and I fully expected to go, but I got really sick. So the next day I went to work, and I had, all of a sudden it hit me that fast, and so I had to go home early, and then called in sick, and I was out. I was cholera. If you ever had cholera, it goes out both ends. You have a high fever. For me, it felt like razor blades from my stomach all the way to my entire gastro tract, sloshing around like razor blades, just cutting you inside. And it was extremely painful. And that's pretty much the extent. My friends left that day to go on, it was a Saturday. They left to go do their little 1-day adventure to fly up over to Grand Canyon and back, and then come back home. It'll be late at night before they got there. And they made arrangements for my neighbor to check on me. And so with cholera, and I found all this out later. I investigated, what is cholera? So I had to go find out what it is. And so I did not know at the time that you have what is known as your body goes in shock when you lose too many fluids. And at that point, you actually feel great. The pain goes away. You get up and you walk around. I was telling the guys, say, it's past. I'm up. I'm around. I'll be fine. I'll see you this evening. I'm just a little tired. I walked into the kitchen. They all left through the door and got in their truck. And I told them, you shouldn't be worried about me. I walked back in the kitchen and stood there at the window trying to take a drink. They drove off. I remember a couple of those guys were just going like, dude, he's crazy. And so I waved to them and they drove off. I collapsed on the floor and it hit me again like a ton of bricks, like the classical symptoms of cholera. And I don't know how long I was on the floor, but I crawled back, managed to get into the bathroom, passed out, and then crawled into my bedroom. Somehow lifted myself up on the bed, extremely painful, and all that mess. But so that's what happened. And I was laying on my bed looking at my alarm clock, trying to pet my dog at the same time. I had a German Shepherd. And something happened. It was like so, it's like I took my last breath, or something you always remember. And I wasn't wearing glasses, but I noticed as soon as that happened, I could see across the room clearly because I'm very nearsighted. My clock was in front of me at 10 till noon. I tried to pet my dog, but my hand went through. I saw a hand come out of my own hand, went through my dog's chin, and my dog was whimpering and crying, really whimpering. And then I was floated above my body. That's how it all started. And I lost my atheism as soon as I started floating above my body, because I realized you're still alive. I was more alive after I left my body than I am right now. I can't explain that, but that's just how it was.
Well, and a lot of people describe when they, transition into that initial out of body experience that, they felt horrible because they were so sick, and they're like, oh man, I felt better. Did you just describe kind of feeling more alive? Was it like you were deathly ill and all of a sudden it was all gone?
Exactly what it was. There was no more pain. I felt real good. I felt totally at peace. The best peace I ever felt. It felt so good. I didn't want to go back in that old body and go through all this stuff. Next thing I knew, I went through the ceiling and past the swamp cooler and on up into what I call a black void heading toward a light, the best way I can put it. And that's exactly what happened. And in that black void, I was drifting toward this light. I felt really peaceful. It was the most joyous experience I had. I felt love and compassion. And I heard this beautiful, beautiful music. And this beautiful music was in another language, yet I could understand what's being said. It was praising God. It was they were praising Him for the mysteries of the universe, so to speak, the best way I can put it. And here I'm floating there, and I could get little life reviews at the same time, how I live my life. And at the time, I didn't realize I was headed toward a reckoning. But if my neighbor would have found me then and got me to the hospital and resuscitated me, I'd have a different testimony, because I'd tell everybody to go to the light. I was up for a rude awakening and a reckoning.
And I guess keep going with the story. What happens next?
Okay. What happens next is that as I was going through this void and I was having this sense of love and compassion and I've been since a Christian, I've been investigating what agape love means and so forth, etc. But I felt all this compassion and love and everything, and I was heading toward this reckoning. When I got to where the light was getting bigger, I could see that it was coming from a person that was standing on a rock, and behind him, it opened up, and I could see a grand city. But then it got dark, and I could see something else, but I couldn't quite make it out. That part got lopped out of the book, but I couldn't really make it out that part. And but I floated toward the rock, and then I landed feet first on the rock, and the person that was on the rock was wearing a robe, and light was coming from him. It was a brilliant light, colors and shades of that I can't even explain. Brilliant white light that would be from different shades of white light and bright light and hues and colors. It was phenomenal. It was coming from the person, and he had his hands in his robe. When he took his hands out, it really got bright. And I landed feet first before him, and I felt like I fell down face first in like a dead sack of wheat. And then somebody or something picked me up. I didn't want to get up. We're right in front of him, and he had a hood on, and I recognized, I knew who it was. It was Jesus. And I was facing a reckoning, because what was being revealed to me at that time was how I gained everything that God gave me. He gave us unconditional. He makes the rain fall on the unjust. He makes sure the animals are fed. He takes care of things. He nurtures. He builds up. So what did I do with it? I took advantage of everything. He gave me good parents. I lied to him. I betrayed them. He gave me friends. I lied to him. I betrayed them. I stabbed some in the back. I stole from people. I sold drugs. I sold drugs to the church youth group. And I was a corrupter of youth. And that was shown to me in these things, how I did that. And then I could see how the people were at the skating party getting whacked out on what I sold them. And they all came back and said, "Oh man, we got to get more." And I became one of the biggest person to get drugs from in the entire school, and I knew nothing about drugs. So I had to make an image change real quick and get involved in that scene just to cover myself. And that's how I lied to myself, how I betrayed people, lied, backstabbed, how I plotted against people. It was all revealed to me. I basically, the best way I put it, and I wrote in my book, A Land Unknown, Hell's Dominion, is the Lord showed me how I made life ugly, really. And when you make life ugly in a biblical sense, you transgress God's law, so to speak. And it's the royal law of love, which most people don't understand. It's loving God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and loving your neighbor as yourself. You'll love, you'll cherish, you'll nurture, edify, build up, you help train, equip unconditionally people around you. You also discipline them. And you also have boundaries to agape love that you don't cross, or you'll be punished. I mean, that's love. Some people have a wrong definition of agape love. It's only unconditional love, but that's very subjective. But what I was experiencing here is how I violated the real law of God, loving Him with all my heart, and proved by how I did not love those around me. I took advantage of them. And that's what was revealed to me. So I couldn't go up to the Lord, nor could I say, Lord, I had a crazy sign hit me on the head, and that's why I acted crazy. And I'm just a victim of circumstances. And there was nothing like that. I couldn't say anything. I saw what I was really like on the inside, how ugly I was on the inside. no matter my excuses, no matter I did some good things too. Helped put out a forest fire before it started, and was thanked by the fire department for doing that. Um, I kept a lady that was witnessing to us, and we saw her being dragged behind the. I wrote about this in the book, behind the shopping center so they can have their way with them. So my friend and I jumped out of our car, pulled up, and jumped out of a GTO, and we just jumped out and took care of the guys and told her to take off and run, which she did. And so we did good things, but they weren't. but,
well,
it didn't cover up. It didn't cover up what I was like
right
inside.
Right. Well, and a couple things I wanted to reflect on in terms of not being able to stand in the presence of the Lord. I've heard that from a lot of people who've had these sorts of experiences when they get into the presence of God or encounter Jesus. Like they can't do anything but be on their knees or bow or be face down, just in the presence of that level of holiness. And I was curious in terms of your life review. Did you feel like as you were seeing how what you did impacted others, like you were getting a perspective almost from like their vantage point of the situation more than your own? What did it look like to see things from their side of things, so to speak?
Yes, it was more of a sensation and feeling what they felt. I could feel my parents' pain, seeing me strung out on drugs, talking nonsensically. I don't know what I was even on, and how I stole money from them, and they knew it. And they loved me, but they still knew I was stealing their money and doing this stuff. And I felt my parents, what they went through and stuff like that. And I saw, how I made God feel basically too. And it says, after you die comes judgment. This is a judgment you face. Your real you is exposed, and not anybody who's not a Christian or whatever. You're going to stand before him. You're thinking that you're hot stuff and that you're all justified. That's going to go be flushed down the proverbial, commode. You're going to see what you're really like. It's not pleasant. And so I really never really answered the Lord. All I could do is I wanted to, but I couldn't. I wrote in my book, I was flummoxed. It was like a deer in the headlight look. You're just like, oh my gosh, this is real. Why didn't I listen? Look at all the people. The Lord was good to me. He witnessed to me. He spared my life through multiple car wrecks, and also he saved me from even being shot 2 times. One was during a riot that I was trying to get out of, and the other one was I wrote a little bit about this in a trip we took. Someone came out with flashing a stub nose 38, shoved it in my friend's face, and threatened to kill us because we had long hair.
Well, that's something you don't hear every day.
Back in the day. That's back in the day.
So, Bryan, you end up walking through or having your life review. What transpires? What happens next in the story?
Well, after that, he said that he said that you'll see a land unknown that's best forgotten, but not to be left unseen. I remember those words. It's still an option to be decided, basically, if you return or not. I knew what he meant. Come back to where I'm standing. Okay. And then when you arrive at this place, say my name and my title. That's what he said. Say my name and say my title, which I knew was Jesus Christ, because I knew who it was. I could see this. You just know. And so I was immediately picked up by a force and lifted up and would be Jesus's left side. And it opened like a scroll on the roll would be my right side, which would be his left side. Open like a scroll like a door, like a scroll. And I went through it, and it was cast into a tunnel-like vortex. It was a greenish yellow. The colors you can't, and black. Those colors, the human eye can't see. I tried to match those colors. There's no way. And mustard yellow doesn't cut it. Nothing. And it's swirling like a tornado vortex, and I'm going through it, going toward the yellowish dent light, a different type of light. And this time when I got there, I fell through the sky and bounced on the ground, literally. And then I stood up and I realized I thought this was hell. And I remember when I was a kid, everyone talked about hell as flaming fire and brimstone, devils with pitchforks, and the guy wearing tights with a pitchfork and wings and stuff. And it was none of that. I was sitting on a hill, and there's a little valley and a house sitting on the other side of it. Everything was kind of brownish color and dead looking because it was so hot. And there was a dilapidated tree, and the house oddly was similar to the house that I used to live in at my parents' house back in Virginia, but not quite. There's a difference. And this dilapidated tree, it was in a different position in the yard. It would be the tree would be where our driveway was, but it's not the same house. But it was, so I looked at that, and all these people came out of the house. Then more people came up out of the valley, it looked like to me, and welcomed me to paradise, slapping me on the back and everything. And things just didn't feel right. And I would say that you can't be here because you're not dead, because a lot of these people I thought I knew who died. And so they began to morph into other creatures right in front of me, and they tried to distract me. One even tried to appear as my mom, and I said, "You're not my mom. My mom's not dead. You're not dead." And they would appear in morph into what they were, and then they all changed. I could see in their eyes. It was like alligator eyes, that yellow irises, and all of a sudden I could see what they really were like and what they looked like. And then they surrounded me, and that's when I started saying Jesus Christ, His name, and His title nonstop. I had permission. He gave me permission to say His name in the title. That's the first thing that people need to realize. He gave me permission in this place to say His name. When I said His name, they couldn't grab hold of me. They couldn't bite me, but they could, push you. They can touch you, come up, and weird sensations, by the way, and to be poked and prodded by these things. But they couldn't grab hold of and chew me up or whatever they were planning to do. And so this one creature came out from the crowd, and I nicknamed him Lizard Breath. In fact, I actually found I'll send you a picture, a photograph, personal photograph of a statue that I found that was made near in Loveland, Colorado. And this statue, we're walking around, and I saw it from a distance, and I told my brother-in-law, I said, "That looks like the creature I saw. It's the best representation I ever saw of Lizard Breath." And so we walked over to it. It had a dinosaur-like tail, or an alligator-like tail, and dinosaur-like. It was reptilian, but his mouth was bigger, and I couldn't tell you how many eyes he had because his breath was so foul, it would distort his face, and I could see 1 eye, 10 eyes, 20 eyes. I couldn't tell you, and because his breath was that foul. But, in a dream, you don't smell things, okay? This, you could smell, you can feel it, you see it. And then breath was foul. That's why I call him Lizard Breath. I mean, so he took me, he said, "Come follow me. I offer you half my kingdom," and so forth, etc. And so on this, so I go back to the statue real quickly. When I went to the statue, it was a opening day like for this place, and they had the history of it. And this was in the African art section. And it said, "This is the traveler who escorts people into the underworld." And you talk about creepy. It's like the Twilight Zone moment. That's what it was like. And I go, and so I had to take pictures of it. So I'll send you one.
Yeah, please. I'd love to include a picture of that in the interview. I think people would be very, very fascinated by that. So you transition to this new space. It's kind of brownish, like things aren't well off in terms of the environment. You see what looks like the house you grew up in, a tree, and these creatures. Where does the traveler who brings people into the underworld, like, where does he lead you? Do you follow him? What happens next?
I started following him, and I thought we were going someplace, but we took a few steps, and we're at the horizon. He stuck his hands in the horizon and ripped it open, and then he stepped up and out of this place, and I didn't know what to do. I just followed him. He motioned me to come. I didn't want to stay in there with these things. I just said, I got up, and I came up standing on a wide, dusty road. And I came out of a cube or a cell. The Bible talks about chambers of death, and it describes hell as a pit, as a dungeon, and with cells in it, and everything like that. The Bible actually does. pretty much what I saw was the pit of hell. At the time, I had no idea what I was seeing, but I stood out of there. I was scared. I wanted to wake up, and I couldn't. And I also knew I deserved this place at the same time. So I'm sitting here trying to I can't process this. All I could do is follow this thing. And he got up and he pointed to the road and things going on. I could see tornado vortexes dropping people off into the cells, just like I was. And I also saw a wide, dusty road, these gaggles of these hideous looking creatures, these demons and demonic entities walking around. Some were escorting people along this road, escorting them into these cells. It was very hot. It was dry, dusty, but the dirt of the place felt like I was walking on rotted flesh, but it was dusty. Very strange. And you can see hot glowing rocks in different places too. And you can hear a roar of flame, and it stunk. It smelled so bad. You could taste it. And it was so hot, it's like Bill Weiss would say, it's like your eyeballs are going to melt out of their socket. But I'm walking in this place, following this thing. And so he took me to the center of this, where the road was, and it was a circular pit. And the best way I could describe it in a nutshell would be a spiral staircase. And a spiral staircase, the bricks were the cells, and the cells were stacked 6 high and layered like a brick layer does in a circle. So behind the first few cells that open up in little V-shaped formations and in little rooms that further you go back. And so we walked over there, and I saw the tornado vortexes. I looked down, I looked up, and then the best way I can describe it was a bottomless pit, as far as I could see either way. And he told me this was a grand place, and they do this, that here, and he motioned me. It's all. I wrote about this in the book, and so I walked over and followed him, and he went back to the cubes. And then we got back to the cubes. All I could do was just stare, and he was in front of me, and all these other creatures would come up and stuff. It was very, you just want to wake up. And so we looked into these cubes, and I could see people inside of these cells. And I was instantly granted to know their life history in an instant. I don't know how to explain that. And so I knew how they got there, when they got there, what year and time. And I could see inside the cell what was going on. But I also could see from the experience of what the person and what was going on inside at the same time. Very difficult to explain. That's why I had such a hard time writing the book. My first edition of the book was 40 pages long. I didn't know how to describe it. And so I took my old notes and went back and rewrote my book later on, but to try to describe it even better. And so I was looking at this stuff transpiring, and people were it was just degrees of recompense, just like the Bible says. There are just degrees of recompense, payback for how you gamed the system, gamed God, made life ugly. It's all coming back to you. And you're living in a never-ending nightmare, and that's what these people were. And I saw a lot of people. It was just a kaleidoscope of people walk by, instant thing. And sometimes we stop, we would watch, look what was going on. And I could see, I wrote about this person in the book. There was a professor writing on a blackboard. I walked by there, and he corrupted youth with his ideas. Never thought in the instance that there was any payback for what he was teaching. And I walked through another, and I saw a lecherous fake minister who wasn't a minister. He was basically looking to have his way with the young girls and ladies. And he died in I call it the Cane Patch Revival in Kentucky, Virginia, and area. And it was in this late or early 1800s. You can research that time frame. And so he was involved in that. And he was inside of his cell. He was at a revival meeting, but nobody paid attention to him because they were demons and sitting in chairs. Even the chairs were demons. There were all the props were. And they got up and chased him out, beating with a big black book. He thought he could run, but inside these cells, they're small. And as he ran, the scenery would change, but I could see what was going on. It was like he was running on a treadmill. It would be similar to what you see inside, much later on, Star Trek Next Generation came along with the the holodeck, sort of like that type of thing going on. And he was running, and then all of a sudden this entity came in. Excuse me, this entity came down, went through the roof of this place, dropped down. And he had cloven hoofs and stuff, and almost like talons too. And he put this his bird-like leg with the stuffed cloven foot and these talons on his chest and start crushing the life out of him, laughing. And then it would begin all over again. Another scene would change, and he was reaping what he sowed. And everything that he took advantage of and stuff was coming back to haunt him. Saw people like this all over the place. Saw a woman who played with people's life like a cat does with a dead mouse. That's why most people don't like cats, because the gifts they bring in. I owned a cat, I agree. I just don't like to have a kitty giving you a dead mouse, or a snake. That's even worse. And it's still alive. But anyway, but this person would be like that toward people around there. I saw people from different time periods, history, saw the high priestess lady who would, I didn't know at the time how much this correlated to ancient pagan religion. So at the time, I knew nothing about them. But she was in the temple outside of Corinth, and I knew that. And I looked it up, and there was one in Artemis or Diana, whichever one it was. And they would basically you would, in the secret religion, you would donate or give your firstborn to be burned or killed in order to acquire power. So in order to avoid that, they would give, by proxy, have the temple prostitute get pregnant for them, so they do the burning. So they don't have to give up their firstborn. They give it the firstborn of the prostitute. So they're immune to the wrath of their so-called fallen angel gods. I didn't know any of this, but that's what she did. And so she was witnessing all these little entities of her kids coming after her, chewing on her, beating her up. And these entities came in, put her in a reclining chair. I won't say what it's for, but you might all wonder. And they were just ripping her to shreds. And then her body would come back and fall back into pieces, and it would repeat in another scene, just as vile and wicked. No horror movie could convey what I saw. Those were the type of things that I saw. I'm going to do one more for a quick reference. I don't want to take too much more time. I always like to share this one, and it's in the book. It's called Deer Pudding. And I named it Deer Pudding because this made a really impact, because this was the longest one, or two people that I stood the longest and watched. And this was one of them. It's the one that had the most impact. And I saw this tornado vortex. We're walking along the road. It dropped this lady right down there. She knocked on the door. We're walking up to her. By the time we got to where she was, she went inside the cube. And I'm standing there. We stopped. Lizard Breath and I stopped, and we're standing there. Entities were all around, screwing around on the, the cells are sort of stacked like a brick layer, but they were concave, so they're little ledges. So some of these would run along the ledges and stuff and say things to you, and they want to tear me to shreds. But anyway, at the same time that's happening, I'm looking into this cell, and so this lady comes there. She just died in 1980 in a car wreck, and she thought she was at grandmother's house. And her grandmother opened the door, and I could see, again, inside what was going on, her perspective and me standing outside at the same time. Very weird how to explain this. But so I'm watching this transpire. And so she's in, next thing, goes into this older looking house. And Uncle Joe was there, her grandfather was there, and all these aunts, uncles, and people she known died, saying, "Welcome to paradise." That's why it struck me, because that was what they said to me when I entered this place. "Welcome to paradise. You're going to enjoy this here. You have eternity here, Deer Pudding." That was her name that her grandmother and her grandfather called her, Pudding. So Deer Pudding, that's what they said. And you have eternity here. Can't you feel the love? And I'm going, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, sometimes you think, looking back, you're watching something far worse than a horror movie. don't go through that door. You can't say any of that. And she's, you're not in a nice place. You can't say any of that. And so I'm watching this transpire, and her grandmother says, "Yeah, paradise. This is paradise. You have eternity. Can't you feel the love?" And she would say, "Oh, I feel the love. This is so lovely. This feels so wonderful. Man, this is wonderful." Well, the love that she felt was an ooey gooey love. I can't really explain. It's a worldly love. It's deceptive, very deceptive. It was like somebody ready to trick you, and they're really going to carry you up. That type of fake love. And that's the nature of that place. When these people entered there, they felt that. And she felt like this was something was really wonderful. And so the grandmother, or which was actually an entity, I could see the grandmother as the entity and the grandmother at the same time, sort of transparentness. And so I looked at that transpiring, and then they said, "Let's go outside," and walk through the kitchen to the back porch and walk down some stairs into the backyard. But they thought they were moving, or she thought she was moving, but she was in this 10 by 10 or 14 by 14 foot cell. It's in those dimensions. And the floor would move like a treadmill, and she would walk, and she look around, and she's outside, and her grandmother says, you love this place. Why don't you go rest under your favorite spot over there by those trees? I'm going to go inside and bake your favorite cookies. You have all eternity here. And the way the grandmother said that, he had the evil grandmother look. I'm not kidding. And she thought this was wonderful. So she went over to her favorite spot, which was by a stream. And I got to say, there is no water in hell. She got by the stream. She started hearing these noises and a little uneasiness she felt. She put her hand into the water, but there was no water. She pulled up sand, and then she realized she wasn't in a nice place. She felt the heat. Then all of a sudden, the two trees were like tentacle-like beings, and they reached over and grabbed her, and she shrieked. And people always ask me, so why? Well, she thought that she was a good person. Everybody around her would say that she was a member of the PTA and that she loved her kids and she baked goodies for everybody. She was number one. She always had to be in control and in charge, and she was a very affable person. People would say that she deserves heaven, not this place. What they don't see or did not see is what her family saw in other people. She was a very controlling, dominating person. And she would tell her kids, you will not be a truck driver. You will not be an astronaut. You will not be, you're going to be a doctor. You're going to be a dentist. And if you disagree with me, I'm going to beat you with this hairbrush. And that's what she did. And she was mean to her husband. She was vile. On the inside, she was vile. She treated people wrong on the job. And 1 minute she's nice. The next minute, she's a typical narcissistic personality disorder is what was displayed. And she fooled so many people. So she wasn't a nice person. And it was like she realized just who she was, and it came. Now, I say this for just one reason. If she was resuscitated, which is through medical science, you can be resuscitated. If she was resuscitated, when she entered into that grandmother's parlor and showed me outside at that moment, she would be on Oprah telling everybody to go to the light. And that was my message. I think the Lord wanted me to convey. Not all that glitters is gold. If it sounds too true, good to be true, then it is. Why would you trust a used car salesman selling you a lemon because he says so? No offense to used car salesmen out there. I know some good ones, but
yeah, I don't know. We have a lot of used car salesmen who listen to the podcast, but yeah, no offense to you if you are one. So you're getting led kind of down this road. You're kind of getting you have the perspective, and I've heard Ivan Tuttle talk about that, where you just understand, like you just know in your knower why they're there, what happened, the circumstances of their life. How do you like? What's the journey out? How do you go from experiencing that to coming back into your body? What did that look like?
what that looked like was, well, I was led. We went in between the cubes into these little rooms where there's gaggles of these beings, and we just wind our way through there to the back recesses. We were down several levels, and at every level you went down was the more the torments increased, and the personal nightmares of these people were increasing. And and we went down some, and then we came to the area where the cells, where the bricks would not be a brick, there'd be wide gaps. And so in this back part was a cell that was open. It looked like a dentist chair in it. And this is how it all ended for me. And I knew, and I realized, like, for the nature of this place is that these things, is that wherever you were, say you landed someplace in the upper echelon of this pit, it moved. The cells slowly moved to lower levels of torment, where the torments increased. And I'm not kidding you. And that's what it was going on. And so this would be where my cell would have been. I just knew that. So for some reason, I saw where we entered and where my destiny, or not anymore, but that's where I was headed. And so there's this cell that was a little larger. It was, and than the other ones, and it was open. And that means the whole host of hell could come in and torment you. So I realized that when he said, "I'll offer you half my kingdom," he was offering half the kingdom of hell to torment me. And so I was just in this there, and there's this dentist chair there. And it wasn't a dentist chair. I knew it was a creature, and all these creatures in there, all these demonic looking beings. And I was at my wit's end. I was, this was the end. This is where I belonged. This is where I was going to spend eternity. And I knew it. This is what I deserved. And there's no argument could convince me. Not even to this day, no one can convince me that is not what I deserved. And I sit there, and it was like I did not want to go. And this force was dragging me through, I call the fleshly, dusty mire. No other way to do it. It was oozing over your feet, and did not want to go. I was giving up hope. There was no, the only love I felt was before the Lord. Here, your absence of true love, totally abandoned, and there's absolutely no hope. And I wanted to wake up, couldn't, and knew I was dead, and knew I deserved this place, and I was being propelled into this place I did not want to go. And I made it for myself, actually. And I felt a presence coming in behind me, and this is how it all ended real quickly here. And soon, the closer this presence got, which I did not know who it was because I couldn't think. I did not want to go where these entities were. I knew what would happen to me. I kept seeing what would happen to other people. I knew it was my turn. And I couldn't tell my parents where I was. I wanted to, and I couldn't, I just can't. And you're being propelled in this place. And all of a sudden, the presence got closer, and all the entities scurried out of there and just left. I wrote about it in the book a little bit more detail. People can get that if they like. And I was almost ready to be into getting real close to being inside of it. And when the presence behind me came, and it was shaking the ground, it was like rocking the ground, boom, boom, each footstep. And all the entities took off. And I did not know if this was the head honcho with the pitchfork and the tights of throwing me in there or not. I didn't know who this was. And then at the moment when I lost all hope, if I start crying, you gotta forgive me. It's just very, 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 every time he lost all hope. And the presence got behind me, he lifted me up. And then I recognized who it was, because in his wrist, the nails were his bones pulled apart. Psalms 22, I found out later, talks about somebody hanging on a cross, his bones pulled apart. At that moment, I realized, if I was alive back then, I would have been the soldier driving the nails. And I did not deserve to be rescued. So he picked me up. I felt the most incredible compassion and love I never felt before in my life. All I did was cry. And I cried on his shoulder. And we went back through this maze of stuff. And then we came out to the wide, dusty road. Excuse me. Getting a little choked up here. And went to the wide, dusty road. And we went to where the donut hole space is in the center of the staircase, so to speak. We went up and went back to where I entered in from. where the cell was. For some reason, I saw the cell where it was and where it ended, and I came back through where I entered. And went through the same tornado vortex. This was Jesus carrying me. And then I know years later, and I know Psalms 40 does not apply to me. It applies to anybody who felt like they've been abandoned in a thing. And it more applies to what Jesus went through prophetically than to me. So Psalms 40 is not for me. People should read that. But the imagery that I went through is very similar to that. My feet were in a miry clay. I gave up all hope and Jesus rescued me. And I deserved it not. And when I came back out of that thing off to his left, he set my feet upon a rock, same rock that we entered. Spoke to me. I won't say everything that he said. A lot of it you just can't say. And he blew on me. And he basically, he would speak by thought. He said, "Go in peace." And that's what I felt. So I went backwards through the dark void, hearing the beautiful music, feeling great again. And I came through the ceiling and landed feet first. My feet landed in my feet first. And I landed in the same position I died in. I couldn't breathe. And I looked at the clock. It was 10 till 4. And I do not, this part is cloudy. I know I could not breathe. I do not know how the neighbor found me. All next thing I knew, I was standing outside, and this guy's trying to hold me up and getting him in his truck and rush me to the hospital. And that's where I was diagnosed. And they were trying to take blood at the time, and my blood was viscous. And they were pumping stuff into me, IV solutions.
Well, and I guess the place I'd love to land this conversation, I think we'll end up doing a follow-up conversation to unpack more of your story. I think there's a lot that we didn't even get to cover yet today. But in terms of how it impacted you, in terms of following Jesus and just like understanding why you were sent back, that you had a kind of a purpose and a calling. What shifted for you on this other side of the journey?
Well, after I got out of the hospital, I got back to the duplex apartment, and I can't remember the day or nothing at the time, but I got back there, and I was all my roommates, they were leaving, they were going to work. I had to work. I couldn't go back to where I had a long period of off to recover, and so I sat. They left, and I sat in a beanbag chair, and I said, "Jesus, I never want to go back to that awful place. Take me, I'm yours." And that was my salvation prayer. And people say I'm crazy, whatever, because of the experience. They'll say you're even more nuts because of what happened. As soon as I said that, I'm in my duplex apartment. Only has a swamp cooler. This is Tucson, Arizona. It's been 121 degrees, 114 to 121 for several days. I mean, maybe 104 or up to 121, and usual temperatures in the desert. And so I'm in this house. It's about 94 degrees in there. The swamp cooler wasn't really working too well. And I was sitting there, and I felt a cool breeze blow upon me and entered me. And that's how I got born again. So John chapter 3 has a little special meaning to me. You're born from above, and that's the breeze came from above and engulfed me and then went inside me. And I've never been the same since. I took a 180-degree turn. It was a slow turn. It took me a while, about a year, almost a year before I started going to church. After that, I was messed up, and had post-traumatic stress, didn't know it. Sight, sounds, smells would trigger it. I did not want to tell anybody what happened because they'd think that you were nuts. Here's a psych ward for you. So you just kept everything bottled up and didn't tell anybody until after I became a Christian.
Well, in terms of a story like this, I find people will often fixate on this point or that point that you share in the journey. So, like for you, whether somebody reads your book or anytime somebody hears you share your testimony, like if they only capture one thing or take away like that most important thing that you share, like what is that thing you want every person to take away from your story?
Oh, just realize there's eternal recompense, and you're not as good as you think you are. And what was really exposed, what I like people to try to really see, is their pride. And you have people have pride and they cover it up. And pride is very deadly. This is a self-righteous pride. I don't want to accept Jesus because you know, God called all the innocent, sweet pagans who burned their children to Moloch to death. And God's so cruel, and he wants to control you and all this stuff. And while they're following the devil, they're being controlled by addictions, drugs, whatever, and their pride won't let them surrender. I just say, surrender yourself. Say, Lord Jesus, Uh, I don't want to go to the awful place. Take me, I'm yours. That's all I can ask. The most important thing. You need Jesus Christ to save you because he came and proved God's love. He showed you what God does. In the Bible, people hate the Bible. Well, the Bible tells you that, come, let us reason together. God reasons. Look at the world today. It's authoritarianism. It's cramming things down your throat against your will. That's not God. God reasons with you. He's good to you. He's always trying to woo you back, knock on your door, and you don't want to come to him, and because your pride's keeping you away. Look at the world. Do you want to live in this world of authoritarianism and stuff? And you think we're living a debased lifestyle and all this stuff is a measure of God's love? How proud is that? You think that uh, his love is going to accept everybody into heaven by osmosis and it's going to be great? That's you thinking that. That's your pride. That has to be surrendered. You have to lay it down. I mean, and then after, as a Christian, when you're in your walk, you have to be on guard against it, just like the Apostle Paul was. You're always on guard against your pride creeping up and thinking that you're something when you're not. And that's the danger I see in a lot of people, is that sends you straight to hell. And when you have that revealed to you, standing before the Lord, and you see what your stinking pride is like, how you justify yourself and all your acts, just listen to yourself sometime in front of a mirror. And so my best takeaway is that you need Jesus Christ, who died on a cross, exposing what we're really like to each other. Jesus was betrayed. He was abandoned. He was plotted against. Everything you've done to everybody else, Jesus went through in the 24 hours before the cross, exposing what iniquity is like in us, how we make demands on people, how we want God to perform to our own liking. All that's displayed in that event. And then he was nailed to a cross, suspended between God and man, taking the wrath of God for us, putting him on the cross in the first place. A love like that is too far profound for me to wrap my head around. So God proved to me by the cross his great love. And the message I got out of this whole experience was a deeper appreciation, understanding of the cross, and to convey that to people in the shortest amount of time as possible, so they can just look up and say, Lord Jesus, I don't want to go to the awful place. I'm tired of living my life. I don't know how to change. Take me, I'm yours. I surrender. That's all I ask. That's the most important thing that I ask people to do.
Well, it's hard to think of a better place to wrap up an interview. Bryan, with what you described, we read in the scriptures that our best efforts, our best pursuits on the earth are really like filthy rags, menstrual rags, if you translate the language there. But so our best is still just the worst. And so I feel like what you described really helps to illustrate that. Bryan, in terms of people reading more of your story, I know you have one book out, you have another book that's in process. What's the name of the book that's currently available? And then just tell us a little bit about the book that you're working on right now.
My current book, you can find it on Amazon.com. It's A Land Unknown, Hell's Dominion. And it's by, my writing name is B.W. Melvin, M-E-L-V-I-N. And you can look that on Amazon, go to your bookstore, order it, look on a Christian retailers and order it there if you like. And you can find out more about how I wrote the book and other things. It's all there in the book. The second book is, let's see, what was the title here? Behind the Rock of Heaven, because it involves, it was several years after I saw hell, and I was sort of a basket case. I was working myself to death in the church and all this stuff. And this is a story of the Lord actually showing me heaven to calm me down about seeing hell. It's a very personal. I don't talk too much about it. There's a lot of things I don't share about it because it's more of a personal thing. It healed me from seeing hell, helped me come to terms that I am in the Lord's hands. He made me righteous. He's faithful to carry out his word. And I don't need to work so hard to try to preserve my salvation. He has me. And, I live a repentant life, all that. But this was just, he has me. And that's what the message from heaven basically was, he has you. It's John chapter 10. No one able to snatch you out of his hand would be the theme I came back with from there, as well as a more of an in-depth study of the cross and some other things. And that hopefully I'll be able to put in this book.
And Bryan, in terms of people connecting with you, finding out more, where are some of the places we can discover you on the web?
Okay, I currently do some different things right now. I do the interviews all over the place, but if you want to see content of what I do, you can. I post videos on Josh Peck's Daily Renegade 2.0 website. I also do my own, and I share a lot of my videos with permission. I give Josh permission to use my videos, and I have them on my YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is The Christian Marauder, and I can give you all that information a little bit later. You can look at my website. It's afterhoursministries.com. And if you like, those are how to, some information. Also, if you'd like to contact me, I have a Gmail account I just use for people to contact me. It's bwmelvin1 at gmail.com. And so.
And like we do with every episode, we'll make it easy. We'll have links in the show notes to websites Bryan mentioned, links to places where you can pick up your very own copy of his book as well. It's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with Bryan Melvin. Once again, you want to get more of his story, be sure to check out his book. It's currently available on Amazon and wherever great Christian books are sold. Once again, that title is A Land Unknown, Hell's Dominion. And Bryan, I want to say thank you so much for sharing with us today. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, God bless you, and thank you for having me. Amen. God bless you.